Rock Chalk and welcome to this year's KU Alumni Weekend. I'm Jessica. I'm a registered dietitian and two-time KU alum. Later you will meet another registered dietitian named Caitlin, and today we are going to talk about a couple different eating patterns for overall health. Today we're going to be talking about prevention, so ways that we can stay healthy and prevent the development of chronic disease and cognitive decline. Those two eating patterns today are going to include a Mediterranean diet eating pattern, as well as a low-fat eating pattern. You may hear low-fat and think that that's a restrictive diet. We are not talking about a restrictive diet. The low-fat diet really emphasizes the quality of fat that we're getting in our diet and how that fat can be beneficial for our overall health, and that we don't overeat our dietary fat, which tends to happen in a typical Western American diet. You may have heard of the Mediterranean diet. It's kind of hot right now. We are definitely studying the Mediterranean diet and its benefits, and we'll talk about that study a little later on. But the Mediterranean diet includes a variety of fruits and vegetables, lots of colors, lots of different phytonutrients that are anti-inflammatory. It also emphasizes healthy fats, omega-3 fatty acids, unsaturated fats, things like olive oil, nuts, and fatty fish. It also emphasizes lean proteins, kind of staying away from the red meats and things like that. So we're going to demo a couple recipes that are going to emphasize these things. We're going to bring it all back together. And then we'll talk about some of the studies we have going on at KU right now. So stay tuned. We're about to get started. So today we will be making a lean chicken meatball. This fits within both of those eating patterns that we were talking about, the Mediterranean diet as well as a low-fat eating pattern. Sometimes these diets really do overlap, and that's because they really emphasize whole, real foods and really lean proteins and making sure that we're kind of steering clear of those really heavy saturated fats that are found in red meat. So without further ado, we'll get going on our lean chicken meatball. So we're just going to start out with a pound of ground chicken breasts, again, a very lean cut of meat. A staple in all of our meatballs is going to be a breadcrumb. We're going to use a whole grain breadcrumb. This is emphasized again in both of those eating patterns. And I typically pick up the whole grain breadcrumb that has Italian seasonings in it. It just gives it a really nice flavor. Meatballs tend to be considered an Italian dish. So we're also going to add a little bit of ground oregano. Again, this is just going to add a lot of extra Italian flavors. Next, we're going to add some garlic powder. Both of these diets, again, are going to focus on limiting things that we know contribute to development of chronic disease, one of those being sodium. So we're going to use garlic powder instead of garlic salt. We are going to use a little bit of salt, but nothing too extreme. When we limit eating processed foods and we focus on whole, real foods, we're going to naturally just eliminate some of the sodium and the sugar that we're getting in our diet. So using a little bit of table salt in things like these recipes, it tends to be okay as long as we're not eating those processed foods somewhere else. Next, we're going to add some low-fat Parmesan cheese. Because we are making sure that our fat is staying within its ranges, we are going to go with a low-fat option. Additionally, we have some cream, but this is going to be a fat-free cream. You may have to look a little harder for this in the dairy section, but it is there. And so we are going to use this to add a little bit of liquid because we really need to bind it together. There's less fat in this chicken as there would be in like a ground beef. So we do need to use a little bit of liquid to really make sure that we can get that mashed up into a ball. Next, we're going to use some minced onion, just some white onion. Really, you can use red onion or yellow onion if you prefer. That's really just a preference. Next, we're going to use a little bit of minced garlic. I love garlic, and I know that it can be a polarizing thing, so feel free to add more if you love it, less if you're not a huge fan. But again, I like to add some because this is kind of an Italian dish. One thing that I like to do with my meatballs is I like to add a little bit of zucchini or another type of vegetable. This is a way to just add in some extra vegetables, kind of hide them, sneak them in ways that you wouldn't normally think of. So what I basically did here with the zucchini is I cut off an end and then I grate it down a cheese grater, the large whole size of the cheese grater. And so this can really be a way to sneak in an extra little bit of vegetables in something you wouldn't normally think would have vegetables in it. Lastly, I'm going to add a couple of eggs, and this is really going to help us bind the whole mixture together into a ball form. So we have this great mixture. I love seeing the color of that green zucchini in there. It tells me that I'm not just eating a straight up meat dish. I think that it's an excellent way for people that don't necessarily like eating just straight vegetables to get in a little extra. And so next we're going to mix this all together, make sure it's even throughout. We'll form it into balls that are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches wide. That can also be a preference thing, but per the recipe and things that we're going to see, we're going to get them into about 1-inch balls. And then we're going to pop them in the oven for about 20 minutes. So stay tuned. All right, so we're ready to mix together all of these really yummy ingredients. I like to wear gloves. It just keeps things a little cleaner for me. Some people like to do this barehanded so they can really feel the mixture to make sure it's spread evenly throughout. I'm going to wear gloves, but make sure that if you do wear gloves that you're changing them when you're handling raw chicken or other raw meats, and then fresh vegetables. So we're really just going to make sure that this is spread evenly throughout. It's easy to see when the zucchini is spread evenly throughout. Don't hide all that zucchini in one person's meatballs, okay? Everybody gets a little veggie here. So you can see that it's really kind of coming together in a nice consistency. Now when we go to form these meatballs, I usually just use my hands. Some people like to use a spoon. You can also use a cookie dough scoop, just kind of however you prefer. It does get a little goopy. But so then we'll just kind of form these meatballs and we'll throw them in the oven for 20 minutes until they're nice and brown, cooked all the way throughout.
Hi, my name is Caitlin, and I'll be showing you the second part of our recipe. And so this is spaghetti squash with sauteed kale. And if you have never made a spaghetti squash before, I'm going to show you some tricks to make it a little bit easier on you. So what I did was I poked a few holes in the spaghetti squash. You can either do this with a fork or with a knife. And so I did holes all over it. And then you microwave it for about 3 to 4 minutes, depending on what size of squash you used. And of course, wash it ahead of time. Once that is done microwaving like it is here, we are going to cut both ends off. And we can discard the ends in a bowl. Or let it go on the floor. And then so we have a soft, flat surface to make it a little bit easier on us to cut. And then we are just going to use our big sharp knife and cut all the way down the center. You will see that the center of a spaghetti squash looks a lot like a pumpkin. And so we are actually going to scrape out all of these seeds because we won't want to eat that part. So you just scrape it out really similar to how you would a pumpkin. And we can discard those. Pretty tricky to get those out sometimes. And then once we have the seeds scraped out, we're going to use a little bit of our olive oil. So that's one of the healthy fats that you will commonly see in our Mediterranean dishes. And so we can take about half a tablespoon per half, drizzle some olive oil on there, and can make sure that it's coating each half. And then on a baking sheet, we'll put these face down to bake for about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on your size of squash. And then over here, I have a squash that is finished cooking. You'll know that it's done when you can pierce it with a fork and it's pretty soft. And then all you have to do is use a fork and go ahead and scrape it. And then you will be able to see that really spaghetti looking squash, hence the name. And that is what we're going to use for this dish. So you can just go ahead and scrape all of that out, both of the sides. And so this spaghetti squash, it's a great source of dietary fiber. There's a lot of good vitamins and minerals in this. And then we're going to go ahead. So we have a big skillet here. We are going to add the rest of our olive oil. And that's just over medium heat right now. And actually the first thing that we're going to add is we have some chopped up garlic already. You'll notice that we add a lot of garlic into our dishes. So you can use less if you aren't a huge fan of garlic. Then we have just a little bit of salt and pepper to taste. And like Jessica said earlier, that when we add our own salt when we're cooking, we're going to use significantly less than we might otherwise. And then I'm also adding some dried rosemary. So really right away, we're just going to let that garlic cook a little bit. You'll know that it's ready when it's getting kind of fragrant. And so some of the other ingredients we have kale. You can also use spinach if you like. You can use a Swiss chard or collard greens if you like. These will be a little tougher, so we'll want to cook them down a little bit. We also have tomatoes, and then we also have chickpeas. And so this garlic looks like it's cooking pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and add in these cherry tomatoes that we chopped up. If you want to use some canned tomatoes, you can as well. And so these are a great source of beta carotene and B vitamins. They have a great source of lycopene. We're just going to stir those around so they get all that seasoning. We're also going to add the chickpeas. You might also see them called garbanzo beans in the store. And so we have already rinsed and drained these. We're going to add those right to the pan. And really we're just going to let these heat up, and we're going to let the tomatoes cook down a little bit. And so the chickpeas in this dish, along with the spaghetti squash, they're a great source of fiber. In the Mediterranean diet, we often emphasize getting in beans and legumes, and that is one great way to get those in. And while those saute a little more, I'm going to make sure that our spaghetti squash is scraped and ready to go. And now that those tomatoes are getting pretty wilted, we're going to add in 4 cups of raw kale. 1 cup is about the size of a handful. And so we are going to add all that kale. Kale is a great source of vitamin K. It also is a source of calcium. So there's a lot of good phytonutrients in there, along with different vitamins and minerals. And so these will just take a little bit of time to break down. We also we're going to use the juice of half of a lemon. And so a lemon is a source of acid, which will actually help further break down that kale, and it gives it a great flavor. Now that we have that kale in there, we can also add in the spaghetti squash. So we'll just go ahead and add as much as you want. If your squash is a little bit on the big side, you can add part of it and then you can freeze the other half. All right. We have a mix everything together. The kale will take a little bit of time to wilt down. We'll let everything cook together. And then at the end, we have our chopped almonds that we are going to go ahead, sprinkle on. Almonds are a great source of vitamin E, and they are a good source of healthy fats to help. And then we also have an optional, if you want to add Parmesan cheese on top to serve, then that is a great addition. And once those meatballs get done, we'll also add those and make it a great dish with a bunch of different phytonutrients, vitamins, minerals, a good source of fiber, and just a great Mediterranean dish that can also be made low fat, great source of vegetables, and also legumes. All right, and here is our completed meal with the chicken meatballs and the spaghetti squash with kale and tomatoes. A full meal full of lean protein, low in fat, but both following the Mediterranean diet as well. We have lots of phytonutrients, a great source of fiber, great way to get in our vegetables, and lean source of protein. Now I'll start talking about one of the studies that is currently enrolling. This is called the NICE study, which stands for Nutrition Interventions for Cognitive Enhancement. And this study is for older adults, 65 or older, who are willing to follow either a Mediterranean or low-fat eating pattern for 1 year. And the point of the study is to look at the potential benefits of both of these eating plans on brain health. And they are both generally recognized as healthy eating patterns. And so we're going to be looking at cognitive scores, different blood values, and some other measurements. And the NICE study, we just started a group going through, but we will have another group starting early 2021. So at the start of the year, we'll be starting that, and then we also have 2 more groups starting throughout next year. So if you are interested, we'll kind of give you some more information on that, but there is plenty of opportunities to join this study. And starting with the low-fat eating plan, we want to emphasize that this is not a restrictive diet. It is still getting 25% or less of your daily energy from fat. And we have a heavy emphasis on the importance of getting more unsaturated fat than saturated fat in the diet. And so we have a daily recommended intake of fruit, vegetables. We have low-fat dairy and lean protein sources. And then also a recommended amount of grains, with at least half of them being whole grains. And so this is a overall healthy, well-balanced diet. And we also like to watch our intake of salt and added sugars in this diet as well. And then for the Mediterranean eating plan, there is a daily intake of a variety of fruit and vegetables. And we really put emphasis on a variety of fruits and vegetables. And so we want to get different colors daily. And that might look like dark green vegetables, red and orange vegetables, and then making sure to get in citrus fruits throughout the week. And we also have whole grains, olive oil, and nuts daily. And then weekly, we emphasize an intake of seafood, beans and legumes, and other protein sources, along with moderate portions of dairy products. And like I mentioned with the low-fat plan, In the Mediterranean plan, we also want to limit our added sugars and also our processed meat intake. And that is what the eating plans look like. So what participants will actually do in this study, we randomize you into one of the eating patterns at the very start, and then we have testing at baseline or the start of study, 6 months and 12 months. And throughout these study visits, we will collect height, weight, we will get a Vegimeter score, we will do blood draws and blood pressure at start of study in 12 months. We will have you fill out 3-day food records. There will be a cognitive test at each time point. There's a number of surveys that cover anything from physical activity, health, and general food and nutrition knowledge. And then there's also an optional MRI. And then throughout the study, we have monthly nutrition classes and food demonstrations. Currently, these are offered either in person or through Zoom. So if people aren't comfortable coming in right now, then we have that option. And for the first 6 months of the study, we also give both eating plans a complimentary grocery box to just supplement the plan and help them follow it a little better. And then we also have monthly phone calls with a registered dietitian who is there to help in any way possible. If you're having trouble with tracking the study or following along, they're there to give recommendations and help any way possible. And if this looks like something that you might be interested in participating in, some of the eligibility criteria is we are taking both males and females as long as they are 65 or older and living in the Kansas City metropolitan area. We're looking at a BMI between 20 and 40, no diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's disease, not taking the prescription drug warfarin, and no tree nut or fish allergies, and that won't include shellfish. So if you have a shellfish allergy, then that should be okay. And then also no diagnosis of type 1 diabetes or a recent cardiac event. Now, if you think that you might be eligible or you know someone that might be interested or eligible for this study, you can contact Hannah at the Alzheimer's Disease Center, and her phone number is listed there along with her email address. And if you would like just any more information on the study or about the cooking demonstration or the recipes today, you can also contact me. My email is down below as well. And let us know if you have any additional questions about the NICE study or the cooking demo.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. So today we really talked about the Mediterranean diet and low-fat eating patterns that are geared toward prevention, and those eating patterns are being studied in that NICE study. And they really incorporate whole, real foods that have lots of phytonutrients, kind of steering clear of those processed foods that have lots of added sugar and salt, getting away from that really inflammatory Western diet and more toward a diet that has lots of anti-inflammatory fats, lean proteins, and less of that sugar and salt. So that is really geared at the prevention side of our research. We also have another study that is geared toward a therapeutic intervention, and it is called Therapeutic Diets in Alzheimer's Disease, and that is TDAD, is its abbreviation. And so we are currently enrolling for that study as well. And we are looking for individuals with mild Alzheimer's disease for a 3-month-long study. And so the 2 eating patterns we look at in this study are a heart-healthy or a ketogenic eating pattern, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But individuals that are eligible would be aged 50 to 90 years old, speak English. We do require a dedicated study partner to attend all the study visits and check in with the dietitian, and also, just kind of be that helper to prepare foods and shop and all that stuff. We also require that individuals be community dwelling, so not in a memory care unit, nursing facility, or somewhere that they cannot control how the food is being prepared. And then some other exclusion criteria: diabetes requiring insulin, recent cardiac event within the last year, cancer in the last 5 years that required chemotherapy or radiation. And then we do have a couple brain scans in the studies, so just the ability to be able to participate in that MRI. And then we have some weight inclusion criteria, BMI 20 or greater, and then less than 350 pounds. And so about the eating patterns, we have a heart-healthy diet, and there's kind of a general consensus that we believe what is good for the heart is also good for the brain. And so the heart-healthy diet has been studied quite a bit, and we do believe that that is a good therapeutic intervention. It does limit saturated fat, cholesterol, eliminates trans fats, limits that sodium, an emphasis on fiber intake, lots of vegetables and fruits. And so you can see there the calorie distribution is 25 to 35% of total daily calories coming from fat, 50 to 60% coming from carbohydrate, and 15% coming from protein. And so really what the heart healthy diet emphasizes, just like the Mediterranean and low fat eating patterns, whole real foods. It also really emphasizes the quality of the carbohydrate. Since our brain uses glucose, it really emphasizes the quality of the carbohydrate. So for the other diet, the ketogenic diet you may have heard of is high fat, very low carb. So no starchy vegetables or fruits, really an emphasis on non-starchy vegetable intake for fiber and those phytonutrients that act as antioxidants and reduce inflammation, and then moderate protein. And you can see the calorie distribution there is quite different than the heart healthy diet, with 60 to 75% coming from fat, only 10% coming from carbohydrate, and 15 to 30% from protein. So if you or anyone that you know has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease and would be interested in joining a nutrition study, please call the ADC at 588-0555. That is 913-588-0555. You can also contact me, and my email address is there on the last slide. And now we'll just open it up for any questions, comments, feedback. Just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, so we'll just open it up and go from there.